All right, Voldemort. It is another day in the week here of quarantine life. Although I'm at work, you're still quarantined because baseball still has yet to show up at all.
Well,
Um,
they've shown up, just not in a good way.
yeah. Um, Now we've talked over this quarantine stretch that I've had many new addictions. Some good, some bad, some obsessive. Trevor
Yeah.
Bauer. But I might have a new one eventually. One of the guys I used to deliver pizza with, because no sports is happening, he's been asking me opinions on NASCAR, and that's sort of what I've been helping him with. And now I'm getting the itch. Maybe I should try betting on NASCAR. I've avoided gambling things because I'd rather not get obsessed with that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's in the future for me.
Maybe, but there is something that's officially now in the future,
Yes.
as I have been saying that whichever sport will be the first to come back will have the eyes of the nation on it. Now, baseball, because of how quickly they can ramp up, there is still technically time for that to happen, but as of now, the NBA will be the first pro sport that will come back on July 31st. They will be
Yes.
the first of the four major sports to return to play since March 14th, 15th. When did everything stop
I think it
again?
was like the 11th or
It
something
feels
like
like
that.
10 years ago. At
I
this,
know, right?
yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah,
I mean,
but
it might be 10 years before baseball comes back
yeah,
because this is just getting insane.
it's
I know we've talked about it being like a bit of a pissing contest, but I don't even think the owners are trying at this point. We heard that some of the owners are completely fine with shutting down the season anyway. Um, and at this point, I'd rather them just say that and say, hey, you know what? We're not having the season this year. Uh, we'll try and maybe reschedule and do the collective bargaining agreement that's supposed to happen like next year, and we'll work on that instead.
yeah.
Because this is just the owners offered that 82 with like 70% of players' normal salaries, which is just insulting. Um, and then the players countered that with a fairly nice 114 game season with expanded playoffs, which would mean more television revenue, which the owners like that television revenue. Um, but then the owners countered with 50 games, which was just, I don't even know why they even did that. That was just dumb. But
And
now
now,
it is,
yeah, now
what, like 70 something games?
yeah, 78, and we'll get
76.
we'll get we'll get to that a little later. I want to talk about the start with the NBA because that's something
Yeah.
we have concrete.
That
It's
that
official.
is.
The
Mm-hmm.
the the owners of the NBA teams have approved it. The NBA Players Association has approved it, so it is official. So what is going on with the NBA? Well, first of all, off it's not immediately going into the playoffs, which is what everyone thought.
Mm-hmm.
22 teams are going to be descending on Orlando on, I believe, the idea was in early July. Partly because they will be training at home, and the state of Florida currently has a 14-day quarantine for anyone coming from states
Mm-hmm.
like New York or any New Jersey or any state that's been dealing with the coronavirus
Yes.
epidemic badly. Uh, After that, they're going to be playing roughly. I I have it here. They're going to be playing about 16 games of the regular season for 22 of the 22 teams that are coming back. 8 teams that are out of uh, the race are going to be. They're not going officially doing anything, but they are talking about a summer league just so their players don't have like a 10-month layoff between playing.
Yeah.
Uh, and then after that, they are going to go into their bracket format. The idea is to start the play-in tournament for the teams on the outer peripherals on the August 16th or 17th. and then after that go right into the first round of the playoffs. With the idea being that Game 7 of the NBA Finals would fall around October 12th if necessary. Now, some of
Yeah.
these dates are still up in the air. They're still hammering
Mhm.
out schedules and all that, but the other idea is where it's going to be. That they're not going to be in their home stadium, their home stadiums. They're going to be in the Disney's ESPN Wide World of Sports complex.
And do you actually know how that sort of got jump started with that?
Uh, with how it got into the world of sports,
Well, how Disney got to host basketball?
I I think is there a story or are you?
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, the leader of the National Basketball Players Association, Chris Paul, is actually like best friends with Bob over there.
yeah, Bob Iger.
Yep.
Yeah,
So those guys are like really good friends. Bob says that Chris and him text about like 7 times a week, talk 4 times a week. When Chris was traded to the Clippers in 2011, uh, Chris wanted to like get to know some people, and him and Bob sort of hooked up, and they're just like really good friends. So Bob, being a businessman, obviously helps him get talking with Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, and they were able to roll things out pretty smoothly.
oh, I honestly did not know that. I thought it was just primarily because of the fact that Disney owns ESPN, which broadcasts a lot of games. So
I mean, that
they're
probably helps
yeah,
as well. I mean, they were working in tandem. They said because the NBA has like a whole bunch of employees over in China, so when China had to start shutting things down and the NBA was there, but Disney also has Disney over there in China,
yeah,
so they were sort of working together that way as well. So the added that Chris Paul is fairly good locker room leader here and working as the players' union head. So everything just sort of seemed to fall right into the perfect places here, and they were able to work together really nicely. Which I don't know how well this would have worked, been this smooth if they were starting the season up like baseball is trying to do. But considering this is the tail end and you're just trying to get to the playoffs, I think this was a little bit easier to do. But one of the things I'm a little not really happy about and scratching my head how they're going to figure this out is, as you said, there's 22 teams. There'll be 11 teams in each conference, the East and West. Normally it's 8 teams from each conference. But because some teams were kind of close to that 8th seed, which I said really shouldn't matter because they're kind of weak, those teams. But what's kind of interesting, I guess, or odd, I guess, from my perspective, is they only want to play 8 additional games. So I guess they still have to figure out the schedule, as you were alluding to before. Who's going to play who? At that point, you might just play those next 3 games, get the extra revenue, and then just play everybody once, because there's no home games really. So there's
yeah.
no like home turf to be like, oh well, San Antonio's playing home, and maybe now Oklahoma might not have the upper hand. There's none of that really. So I think you should just play all the teams once, and then go on that way.
Yeah, well, one of the big reasons for coming back in, we've been talking about this more in relation to baseball, but basketball is player salaries, and right now, player paychecks are being withheld by 25%. And if the regular season was just canceled outright, they went straight to the playoffs, that reduction would have increased to about 40%. So I imagine that that was primarily argued by the players' union, saying, "Hey, we need to protect our interests, and we can't. If you're going to come back, we need to get some of our paychecks back." So
I mean, there was still about like 20 games to actually. No, it was probably less than that. It was, some of the teams were about 65 games in. Yeah, so maybe a little less than 20 games
yeah,
left in the season. Um, so I mean, playing 11 would have been about half of them. But they have a weird sort of stipulation after like the 8 games are played. If there's a team that's within 4 games of the eighth seed, they get to like do a play-in game or something with them. Which, I mean, I guess because you would have only been playing 8 out of like the remaining like say 15 games, so that's 7 games you could have blown at the end of the season there, and the other team could have jumped you. But at that point, those teams who would be eighth, ninth, 10th, they're not going to be winning all those games anyway. So I don't know. I'm not really a fan of that 4 game buffer zone.
again, it's about
yeah,
money.
it's about the money and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
which is why I'm saying they should just do play everybody once at that point and then add it up that way. I think that would just make it fair. It would be easy. You're adding 3 more games, so the players get more games for their money, more television broadcast there. I don't know. But
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that they still need to address, and they're still developing it, is a replacement system for injured and more importantly sick players. This is what's going around in all the sports. What happens if a player contracts the virus, or worse, what happens if there's an epidemic in an entire team? Because they said that they'll play. They've signaled that if a player gets the virus, they'll just quarantine the one player and carry on. But what happens if an entire team gets it? What happens if
then
you
you're
have to
entering territory where that whole soccer
Yeah.
team died in a plane crash all those years ago.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to like redo everything.
Yeah,
You're
or
gonna
you
bring up the G League. I don't know.
Yeah, or you're just going into another Rudy Gobert incident, and this is something that you look at the medical community, and they still don't know that you had the CDC going back and forth on whether it spreads on surfaces easily or not. You just had the other day the World Health Organization say asymptomatic people are they don't have much evidence that they spread the disease, which is something out of the blue in my
Yeah.
and so which is the problem of you're trying to figure out a disease in weeks and months that usually takes years.
Yeah, this is.
So a lot of this
we're
is-
finding new things each day, so
Yeah.
this is still uncharted territory.
Yeah, but it's good to finally see that we have a concrete day of return to sports. So this is being recorded on Monday the 8th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5 weeks from now, pro sports in one of the 4 major fields makes a return. And then after that we have the NFL and its normal time, the NHL at their usual time, but this also kind of sets up a potential Super October if you think about it.
Yeah.
That assuming baseball gets played, and as you'll hear, and that's a big if at the moment, or if in the format that people will want. But anyway, you could potentially see in October the Stanley Cup, the NBA Finals, and the World Series within 30 days of it. Not even 30 days, within maybe like a few weeks of each other. It's going to be a heck of a month.
Yeah, this is just completely insane. The more thing, and then how much farther you're gonna have to push back next year's season, as long as we don't get a second wave. That's too terrible. Because usually basketball's starting back up around like October. Hockey's starting around then as well. So you're just gonna have these players. I don't know if they'll just have them start in say January and be like, all right, we'll start then. We'll delay it by 2 months.
Yeah, they'll likely just delay the season by a month or two and say, all right, we need to shift the schedule a bit, just so that we can.
I think they have to play more games back to back on these nights.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never really played basketball, but I think they should be able to handle back to back games. Um, it's it's kind of sad that baseball is really the only sport that does that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the NHL is definitely, we've covered that sort of last week, saying they're reopening, they had reopened facilities, and they're getting things ready. They just sort of have to
Yeah, I believe they just
finalize everything.
Yeah, most facilities just moved into the phase 2 of reopening, which allows for more practices and such. Some places they're not able to, but it's
and
good
they're
to
still
see.
trying to figure out where they're gonna host and which couple cities and whatnot.
Yeah, have they? I believe they released a list of.
Yeah, like
cities?
potential ones, but I don't think it's anything concrete quite
No,
yet.
and we still don't have a date on when they're going to.
It'll probably be like the end of July, early August as well.
Yeah.
So we'll have that, but I think as for them, they're not doing regular season games.
No,
because they were mostly
they've
closer to the end.
They've already
anyway.
announced that the regular season
they already announced
canceled.
that. So it's just going to go straight to the postseason. They'll have a couple play-in rounds and then seedings to determine the 1 and 2 seeds in each conference. But there's nothing really new in the NHL.
And now let's look to the bonfire that is MLB.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the bonfire is in the bottom of the tires from the NASCAR race last night, because that was nuts.
Yeah.
I thought someone was going to blow a tire, because they were supposed to change tires every 30 to 40 laps, and they did the last 57 laps without a caution.
Oof, yeah.
Everyone was just running tires for almost 60 laps. I was like waiting for Harvick. I'm like, he's been leading most of this race. I'm like, oh man, what's going to happen? And then out of the 40 cars, only 10 cars finished on the lead lap, because I guess everyone was so afraid of their tires burning, but no one wanted to like pit and lose their spots. So it ended up Harvick just sort of kept going, and he just passed everybody.
Oh, that's amazing. Unfortunately, if it's interesting to see how long they're willing to go on that. But unless you have,
they're actually supposed to have. I forget which track it was. They were gonna have. Like friends and family, up to 1,000 people in the stands for one of the races. I thought it was at the Brickyard in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but I think that county is like one of the only ones in Indiana to not be reopened yet, so I don't think they were allowed to. But NASCAR is definitely trying to, but they were going to have it so like you can't bring any food or drink in, no tailgating, which it's really hot out. And if anything, from yesterday's race afterwards, Bubba Wallace, he came out of his car and he actually collapsed on the track. He had a whole bunch of people try and pick him back up, and then they were interviewing him. And the lady Jamie, she's asking him questions. Oh, how you doing? All of a sudden, his eyes rolled back, and he like collapsed again in mid-interview. Yeah. She's like, "All right, he is not all right." And so we just got to be careful with all that too.
Yeah.
So,
Unfortunately,
baseball.
If NASCAR is running on bald tires, baseball is sort of running on rims. And just to catch everyone up on this, when we last left off, we were just figuring out the news that was breaking. I believe it was of the 40-50 game season nuclear option that Commissioner Manfred had, and since then, the MLB had formally rejected the players' agreement of 114 games, and they said they did not expect a counteroffer that was planned until today, when it leaked out to the media, because that's how we figure out all these MLB. Of another proposal. So let's break this down live, or semi-live, shall we? So there, some of the details. I believe this is a 70 a 76 game season, that players would be paid at 75% of their prorated contract. So, again, right around the 35% pay that they have been sticking to on the line. Postseason would still finish by the end of October. That's another thing that they are not budging from. What the owners have budged from, and it's interesting, is they have taken some of the players' ideas and proposals to their things. One is expanded playoffs, but even more so than what we were thinking. Instead of a 14 team playoffs for each league, they want a 16
That's
team play.
way too many. Way too many.
And in a vacuum, it would be too many. But considering that they're only having half a season, having half the league go to the playoffs would be a good way for most non-Marlins, non-Royals franchises to have some value.
Would this 16 team carry over to next year? Because that's what the players when they
the collective bargaining agreement expires at the end of next season, and in any point, any sense, this is just to get back to the field for 2020.
Because when the players had proposed theirs, they wanted expanded playoffs for this year and next year.
Yeah.
As I guess a way for extra revenue to make up for the lack of this year. So I wasn't sure if that 16 would carry over to next year.
No, this would be just for this year. And in a deviation from the usual in baseball, this would be straight bracket. So it wouldn't be East, the wild card against the number one. It's straight up the best record against the worst playoff record, and so on. So
this isn't round robin high school BS.
Yeah, but it is notable to see just how much tweaks they're doing. Another thing is that they are addressing what happens this off season, which is what happens to the qualifying offer, considering they expect payroll to be cut and teams that aren't going to be willing to issue a qualifying offer, and the answer is there is no qualifying offer. It'll be suspended for the 2020-2021 off season, and instead teams would get draft compensation for losing a player who signed a multi-year deal over $35 million or a one-year deal for over $17.8 million, but they would not lose draft picks. And then finally, the biggest thing, and we were just talking about this, is that the owners would codify high-risk players who can opt out of the 2020 season and retain their full salary and service time that they would get from if they play during the season. Players not deemed high risk would not receive neither salary nor service, and they deem high risk individuals as anyone who is likely to suffer severe illness as a result of COVID-19, but not their families. So they have budged a little on the deal, but the problem is they're not budging on the salary, which is the big sticking point. And while the health and safety it's good that they got some stuff, I think with the lack of salary, you might see some players say that's still not enough, and it's still widely expected that the Players Association will counter offer with their own ideas. But it's at least good that despite them having the nuclear option on the table, that they are at least still talking. Because even if they can't agree on stuff, the fact that they are still talking and they haven't walked away and said this is war is probably the best thing we can hope for given the circumstances between the league and the players union.
Yeah, so we gotta hope for the best, but they really have to move fast because, like we said, the NBA is coming back at the very end of July, and they still have to figure out the schedule for that. for baseball, you still have to have another like spring training and whatnot to
Yeah,
get going, and that's like if they agree today.
yeah. That would
Then
put
you got to bring everybody else, but
yeah,
like a lot of players don't live in the U.S. They're in the Dominican,
yeah,
and Panama, and all this other stuff. So you got to fly them in, make sure they're all good, quarantine for 2 weeks there. So looking at a calendar, if everything was agreed to now, then you're not looking until the end of June here, and then you gotta ramp up and do everything.
yeah.
If baseball's gonna start, I don't think it's until like the end of August at this point.
Yeah, and
And
to that end, the owners have told the players if you want to start on 78 games, you have to we have to have an agreement by Wednesday, which is
yeah,
2 days from as of recording, which is I know we've said this a lot, but I'm getting a lot tired of here's our deal. You have 2 days, otherwise we can't do this amount of games. This
yeah,
is it's abhorrent that both the owners and the union are more so the owners, considering the players want to play into October, and the owners are saying no, we're not pushing the World Series into November. But it just this brinkmanship has to end. If you want any agreement of any sort, you got to end this brinkmanship and
yeah.
come to a compromise.
Yeah, they need to figure something else fast because, as we discussed last week as well, I think it was last week or it was the week before, where we talked about MLB not really being America's pastime much anymore. And this is really going to put a damper on this. And it's just completely insane that they can't figure something else out. And with baseball normally being 162 games, I know we've had shortened seasons before in baseball and sport and like the NBA and the NHL. They played most of their games, but to drop it down to less than half of it, honestly, if there's not even 100 games, I'm still gonna watch, but because it's baseball. But I'm not gonna be as interested if it's not more than 100 games.
Well,
Uh,
it's the problem of the worst case scenario for MLB is no season at all. The second worst possibility is a truncated season that everyone knows is because the players and owners couldn't come to an agreement on on a on a season, and it's all because they don't trust each other. To that point, over the last week, a key executive in the discussions, unnamed, said that they had Tony Clark, the union chief for the players, say say that I forget what exactly it was, but gave concession that they could negotiate on the salary and stuff. And when asked about that, not only did Tony Clark say that's completely false, he said that Rob Manfred told him that we could pay you 100% of the salaries tomorrow. So it's the problem that they don't trust each other, and
yeah.
it's the
And
trust
especially
is
that it keeps trickling
yeah.
out through the news instead of like directly
Yeah,
from
that's the
both
biggest
people.
thing. I'm sick of hearing the owner's ideas be leaked out to the media, and then the players don't get a word on it for days or weeks on end. I think after this, both the owners and the union need to reevaluate their top brass. Is Rob Manfred the best person to lead MLB as the role of commissioner? Is Tony Clark the best person to lead the players union in these negotiations? Because honestly, both sides, at least from an outside opinion, and I know there are people on the inside that think this too. They don't get a passing grade from a lot of people, and it's going to fall squarely on them if fans don't like what comes out of these negotiations, whether we have a season or not, and what it looks like.
Yeah, they need to figure out something fast and put it together and make things right. They're way behind on the times. Manfred either needs to step down or step up. because this is just insane that we can't just combine all this together. But what I found really insane, though, is did you know we found a cure for COVID-19?
Really, what is it?
It's apparently protesting, because you could apparently be less than 6 feet apart from people and screaming and spitting all over everyone, and apparently not catch the virus.
Yeah, or well, we'll see about that, and that's going to throw a wrench into all these sports teams and just reopenings in general. If that, as we said, we don't know a lot about the virus, but there are. You're seeing a health community divided, and this forgive us for this little foray into two politics brothers. I almost said two sports politics, but you have some people in the health community saying that racism is more dangerous than the coronavirus, and I don't think any of us can disagree. Racism, all in any shape, way, or form, is wrong, and that love should trump all. Love one another as you would love yourself. It's the golden rule.
Or be like me and hate everybody equally.
Well, yeah. If you have apathy for everyone, then you're treating everyone equally too. But you
Context is everything.
Yeah. But you also have health people, including Dr. Fauci, saying that, hang on, you're all violating social distancing. Some of them aren't even wearing masks, and this could throw a wrench into a lot of things. That we have the NBA wanting to come back on July 31st, but right now Florida is starting to uptick a little in cases. So what happens if it suddenly explodes and they can't have a season there? Same thing for baseball. What if you see a resurgence in cases and they got to clamp down again? So,
well, I mean, the bigger thing is with all these protests going on, and you have all these sports figures going to these rallies and protests and whatnot, and if it says like the virus takes about 2 weeks to kick in, where are we here, on the 8th? So 2 weeks from now is like the 22nd. So
yeah, we're right. We're right about in the first where we start seeing it.
Yeah. So by like next week, or even the week after there, you have people who are sick, and now they got to quarantine for 2 weeks after that. So if we're looking at the 20th, now it's another 2 weeks. Now that's the 4th. But at that point, then you're supposed to start up the season in 3 weeks. Yeah. You're not going to be in shape for that after being sick for 2 weeks and quarantining for another 2.
Yeah.
So this is completely ridiculous. As much as we said, it's a terrible thing that happened. And you definitely want to stand up for injustices like that, but you also have to be smart about it too. You don't want to be getting together and, I don't want to say not cause a scene, but you don't want to expose yourself.
Be smart. Smart,
bro.
Yeah,
you want to be smart about this.
There are ways you can protest and raise your voice against injustices that don't involve standing shoulder to shoulder in the street and potentially getting sick. Never mind all the other stuff that's been happening in those protests the last few weeks, which we shall not get into because we've watched too much of that since that started.
I do want to say, as a sort of a positive protest, I guess, several years back when YouTube had switched from only allowing 200 characters for a comment to whatever. It's like something ridiculous. People had decided to just spam the longest comments as possible. It completely got all the attention it needed to. I mean, you could just easily do that on Twitter and crash Twitter, do something like a peaceful protest, sort of like that.
You know what doesn't take a lot of time to spread, and that is social media, especially with Drew Brees.
Yeah,
and his comments.
I mean, all right. So, real quick, because we're going long again.
Yeah.
But just to sort of break down, several years back, Colin Kaepernick had decided to start kneeling during the national anthem because he was unhappy about police brutality, and and he decided to do it that way because he said he wasn't gonna, more or less, uh, respect a flag, I guess, for something he's not believing in, and it's not what it was the wrong place and wrong time to be doing something like that.
Mm.
And what Drew Brees had said was
I have
basically
I have the
that.
quote up right here if you want me to say it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So he was asked on last Wednesday about because this is now a topic again. You have a lot of players saying that they'll kneel. The commissioner said he's going to reconsider the ban on that, and he was asked by Yahoo Finance about it, and he said he would never agree with the gesture. Quote, "I will never agree with anyone disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. Let me just tell you that what I see or what I feel when the national anthem is played and when I look at the flag of the United States." End quote. And
so there was nothing wrong with what he said.
Yeah.
It's what idiots like LeBron James jumped down and accused him of being racist, more or less.
Yeah.
And that was wrong. And then for Drew Brees to have to apologize,
And
which made it even worse.
Because
some players.
You have people who are mad at him for apologizing, and you have people mad at him for saying, "Oh, he doesn't mean it." So, at that point, why would you apologize? Because
I mean, he had to,
Yeah,
more or less, because he's the face of the Louisiana team, the New Orleans Saints, which has a pretty big demographic down there. As the quarterback, face of the franchise, who helped them win that Super Bowl back in '09, I think.
Yeah.
Or '06, whatever it was. So he sort of had to, and which sort of stems to all these other major companies speaking out as well, mostly because, honestly, I think that they feel forced to, because if they don't, they'll be sort of looked down upon, and I guess that's how a capitalistic society sort of works with democracy. So it's just everything's a little.
I mean, he's not
crazy.
the only one that caught flack. Not lost in all this because of the fact that golf isn't as big as the NBA,
Mhm.
but Tiger Woods received some flack as well for his statement
Yes.
on George Floyd. That specifically that while he's supporting for George Floyd, he's also said his support for law enforcement and against the protesters. Quote, "We can make our points without burning the very neighborhoods that we live in," end quote. And he caught some flack for that. Some people saying that, well, how are you not supporting that? But the difference here is that Tiger Woods said he remembers vividly the King riots in '92 in L.A., which also coincidentally was the last time that the military had to be called in to stop a protest or riot that had gotten completely out of control. So it's the problem in that always comes with athletes in these times of social justice and all that is, where do you stand? How do you say it? And what happens when everyone decides to dogpile on you for something that you believe in but they don't?
Yeah. And there's a difference between what Drew Brees said and the ignorant people. Brees said absolutely nothing wrong. He just said he doesn't. He thinks there's a time and place for it, but during the national anthem, it's not the time to be doing that.
Yeah. My opinion is, you can disagree with stuff that a country has done. You can disagree with where a country is going, but America, I believe, has done more good and so much good in the world that, despite its tarnishes, despite its blemishes, that it should be celebrated for being the grand experiment of almost 250 years at this point. Of immigrants, of freedoms. And yes, there are some blemishes. There are some things that the U.S. is not proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Do we regret those? Yes. Should we let those hinder progress moving forward? Of course not. If you dwell too much on the past, if you dwell too much on on demanding justice, demanding reparations for things that have occurred so far in the past that not even your great grandparents were around for them. You're not going to see what the true goal is in front of you. You're not going to see the true freedoms that you can obtain, the true horrors that you need to put down, the true realities that need to be addressed or embraced. And that is where I stand on this. And I think as my recording hits about 40 minutes or so, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
where we should stand on this episode.
Yeah, I think everyone should just intermingle with each other, and we can all just become one race. I think that's how it's got to go.
do do love, not hate.
Yes. All right. Voldemort, I will catch you later.
See ya,
Peace.
and wash your hands.